Attention all men's ministry leaders. We are excited to announce the first ever No Regrets National Leadership Summit, April 26th and 27th at Elmbrook Church in Brookfield, Wisconsin. This incredible 2-day summit will give you the strategies and tools needed to take your ministry to men to the next level. You'll hear from nationally renowned pastor, author, and speaker Steve Carter, along with Steve Sonderman and many of the seasoned leadership trainers of the No Regrets team. The National Leadership Summit is the perfect place to bring your entire team of leaders to hang out together, learn together, and envision the future of men's ministry at your church together. Register today and take advantage of our lowest pricing option beginning at just $89 per person. Don't miss the No Regrets National Leadership Summit, April 26th and 27th at Elmbrook Church in Brookfield, Wisconsin. For more information, visit noregretsmen.org and sign up today. We'll plan to see you in April. Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast, where leaders are empowered to equip and disciple men.
Welcome to the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. Every week, we encourage and equip leaders to disciple the men in their circle of influence. Our goal is to explore the very best ideas and practices in the area of discipleship and ministry of men. Hey, my name is Troy Thomas. I'm your co-host today, along with the founder and executive director of No Regrets Men's Ministry, Steve Sonderman. Hey, Steve.
Troy, boy, this is so fun, isn't it?
It is going well with this Leadership 101 series that we're in.
There's nothing I'd rather be talking about. I just love talking about leadership and really what it looks like in the life of the church, and even more specifically, the life of Jesus. Because again, hopefully you've heard this from us, that Jesus is our model of leadership. And just to spend time in the Gospels, to look at his life and how he led the disciples, how he interacted with people, just so much to learn from his life. So I'm glad we're able to take this time and to do this.
Yeah, we're stepping back. We're looking at the topic of leadership. We thought it was so essential because this is the No Regrets Leadership Podcast, and most of you would call yourself leaders, and so we're stepping back. We're doing this Leadership 101 series. This is part 3. We've talked about the definition of leadership. We talked about Howard Hendricks, who described a leader as a person who influences people to accomplish God's purpose. That's really the definition that we're hanging on. And then last week, we started to explore the qualities of a leader, the qualities of an effective leader. And so we went through the first of what we think will be 7. We'll see how this list
We'll see how that goes.
Maybe we'll have more by the time we get done. 7 qualities of an effective leader. We talked about a strong private life and a person of character and someone who is accountable to others. And so we kind of pick up that list this week, Steve, and really where we were at. By the way, listeners, if you haven't yet had a chance to listen to last week's podcast, I encourage you to do that as we describe these qualities of effective leaders. But we're going to be talking today, starting with the idea of investing in the lives of others. As leaders, it's so important that we are pouring into others, that we actually are not just receivers of the word, but doers of the word, but passing it on, what we've received.
Yeah, I love it. In my life verse, or my ministry verse, probably a better way to say it, is found in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 8. And Paul says this. He said, "We loved you so much. We were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well, because you had become so dear to us." And Troy, the reason I love that is that, this is one of the first letters that Paul wrote, at least that's what most people think. And Paul was a tent maker. And so, I think what he's saying here is, listen, I didn't come into your city and just sort of drop these gospel bombs, Yep. I didn't just, come and leave. I stayed there. I set up my tent. I set up my little marketplace, and we had meals together. We sat by the fire together. We took walks together. But what Paul is describing here is life on life ministry. He says, what I was really delighted in was just getting to know you, spending time with you, investing in you. And is he the first person to do that? No, it's the story of Scripture, right? We see it all the way through. This is what leadership is. This is what ministry is. It's Moses investing in Joshua, and it's Ezra investing in Nehemiah, and then Barnabas investing in Paul in Timothy, and of course the best model is Jesus. That Jesus was the one who invested in others, and he took 3 years, and he just spent time with people. Jesus was in the people business, is what he did. And so the principle I've seen in my own life, the principle I've seen in leadership, is that the closer you get to people, the greater the impact you will have in their lives. And Troy, that is so freeing, because I think as leaders sometimes we can think, oh man, I don't have hundreds of people in my church or thousands, and I'm not leading this big organization, or I'm not the captain of the team, or whatever it might be. But again, as I said in the very first one, don't worry about the size of your influence. It's about being faithful with what God gives you and where you are. And if God has entrusted you with 1 or 2 or 3 people, men in your church, just to invest in, just do that. And that's what matters. And that's where the transformation takes place, is by just walking. And you've experienced it. You've spent so much of your time investing, meeting with younger men, spending time with them, answering questions, just being there to listen. That's where the change comes. The difference is made.
Yeah, Steve, you mentioned Paul, the Apostle Paul, and we can't go to Paul enough for this this model of effective leadership, investing in the lives of others. I think about the end of the book of Romans, guys. If you haven't read chapter 16. He lists name after name after name after name after name after name after name. He says, greet one another with a holy kiss. These are people that he has poured into. These are people with the residue of Paul's investing his life into them. They have come into contact with Paul. They are changed because of Paul. He has led them in their journey in the Lord. And he greets them at the end of the book of Romans. Check that out. And then another one, I love this passage in Acts 20, where the Apostle Paul is making his way back to Jerusalem, and he's kind of doing a drive-by of the city of Ephesus. And he says, basically, I'm not going to go, Ephesus is inland. I'm not going to go inland. I'm going to meet you on the beach, basically. And so he does that, and he meets with the elders from Ephesus. These are people that had personal impact from Paul. Paul's ministry personally impacted them. And he had led them for 3 years, and he meets them. And there's this wonderful scene on the beach. And at the end of Acts chapter 20, it says, when Paul had said these things, he knelt down and he prayed with them all. And there was much weeping on the part of all. They embraced Paul and they kissed him. Leaders, may that be so with you and your teams. Invest in the lives of others. The closer you get to people, the greater your impact will be in their lives. Don't be a distant leader. Don't be a disconnected leader. Connect with the men in your ministry.
Yeah, it's impossible to think that you can impact people from a distance.
Yeah,
I just love the way you say it, or not to be disconnected, but rather we need to be engaged. We need to be present, and it's it's just being there. It's being an example to them. I think one of the things I say all the time is that people are not looking for an explanation. They're looking for a demonstration. They want to see it modeled, and you can't model from a distance, but rather by being with them. And investment is spelled TIME. You just have to be with them. It takes time.
Right.
That there's no, so it's going to a ball game together, it's going hunting or fishing together if you enjoy those things, going for a walk together, having a game night, watching a ball game, but it's just spending time with them. And guys, again, don't worry about numbers. We've said that over and over again over the last number of years.
Yeah.
But Jesus was never concerned with numbers.
Mhm.
He was only concerned with a small group. And so, you might be sitting at a church and you're going, well, I don't know where to start. Well, just find 2 or 3 guys, find 4 guys,
Mhm.
and just start spending time with them, and then say, hey, would you like to meet on a regular basis? And you just sort of grow it that way.
Mhm.
But start small, go slow, and God will honor that.
So investing in the lives of others is definitely a quality of an effective leader. In fact, I think you could say I have never seen an effective leader who didn't invest in the lives of others.
Right? Yeah, I agree totally. Totally.
And so that's on our list. The next one we have on our list is servant leadership. Now, that is a term that we hear a lot about.
Mhm.
We hear it thrown out in all kinds of settings. What does that mean, Steve?
Well, let's just go back and let's set the foundation for this. Jesus in Mark chapter 10 said, Jesus called them together and said, that those who are regarded as rulers of the Gentile lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. And here it is, not so with you. Jesus is absolutely flipping the role of a leader upside down right now. He said, you've been told that this is the way it is. He said, instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant. Whoever wants to be first must be a slave of all. For even the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. So I think what we're seeing in this passage is that servant leadership, first of all, is counterculture. It truly goes against everything we see in the world today, in business, politics, education, athletics. It's about position. It's about title. It's about who has the corner office. It's all of those things, right?
Yeah.
And Jesus is just flipping it upside down. It's truly counterculture. And so, then the second thing is, he says it's sacrificial. It's not about what you're going to get out of it, but it's giving for others and really trying to see others elevated. As John the Baptist in John 3 said, he said, I must decrease and he must increase. That's servant leadership. That's a picture. What does it look like? It's John 13. Jesus gathering the disciples in the upper room and knowing by cultural norms, whoever was the first one to get to the room would normally just take a towel, take a basin of water, and wash anyone else that came.
Mm-hmm.
But the first disciple gets to that upper room, looks around, doesn't do it, and he goes and sits down, right?
Yeah.
And he probably got a place right in the middle of the table because he knew there'd be a famous painting down the road. And then the next disciple comes in and he goes, well, he didn't do it. I'm not going to do it. And so by the time Jesus gets there, that room is full of a bunch of dirty, smelly feet and prideful hearts.
Wow.
And then Jesus walks in and he looks around. He's got to be disappointed.
Yeah.
I mean, he's been talking on this stuff for 3 years now. And he's been just talking and talking and talking about servant leadership, and they're still too prideful. And so he, takes the towel, and we know the rest of the story, and he just washes their feet. That is a picture of what it is. And so every single day, as we're leading our small group, as we're in our home and at work, we have our eyes open to those around us and saying, what can I do to serve them, to help them to be to be better, to become more like Christ, to see Christ.
One of the ways this became very concrete for me, Steve, is the idea of leaders eat last.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So many of our events, so many of our meetings, so many of our gatherings involve food. And when I heard that term, there was a book out just a few years ago.
Yeah.
That just captured my imagination. And I use that with my teams. Every time there's a meal, every time there's something served, leaders eat last. Leaders eat last.
Great phrase.
And
Great phrase.
pretty soon I found the guys picking up on it. And the problem, Steve, is that they never want to eat. They don't get in line.
Yeah, right.
But
Yeah.
no, that's kind of the practical application of it, that leaders eat last.
Yeah, it is. That's a great way. Yep.
I think there's lots of ways, practical ways that we can be servant leaders,
Mm.
without it being ridiculous.
Yeah, but I think, if a guy would just stop right here and just maybe pause it, come back to the podcast and just maybe make a little list, just get a little piece of paper out and say, what does it mean to be a servant or demonstrate a servant heart at home with my small group of guys, at work, my colleagues at work, or the club where I play or whatever, but just to stop and say, what does that practically look like? Would, I think, be a very helpful exercise for the guys.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's going to look different in every single setting.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about putting others ahead of yourself, trying to understand where they're at, trying to pick up on those clues. Hey, church leaders, do you desire to teach your men how to impact their world for Christ in their own place and space? Then consider bringing Disciple Maker 101 Live directly to your church. Disciple Maker 101 Live covers the same material as our flagship 10-week online course, but in a condensed version. Steve Sonderman, founder of No Regrets, will come to your church and walk your men through this transformative course while inspiring and equipping them to make disciples who make disciples. For more information, visit our website, noregretsmen.org, and book Disciple Maker 101 Live today. If a guy comes into a meeting and he's down or tired or thirsty or needs a box of Kleenex, sometimes that happens. Who's going to get it for him? Where do they turn? They need help. And so anticipating those things, being a step ahead of it, I think is part of leadership. And again, it shouldn't be, it should be a natural flow, not a.
I was just going to say that it's not contrived.
Right.
We've seen that, we've experienced that.
Yeah.
But where it starts is with a servant heart.
Yes.
It's a heart that just is overflowing because of the one who served you and served us. And I often say that I love what you said there, Troy, because I say that leadership is listening, and I think oftentimes being a servant is just listening to the guy who comes into the meeting, to your small group, and he just needs an ear. That's being a servant leader.
Absolutely.
I'm going to set aside my needs. I'm just going to listen, right? Yeah.
Steve, there is this tension, and I think we have it in the church a lot, where, especially with kind of the spiritual gifts movement, where people have decided that they're good at one thing and they're not good at something else. And they really should be focused on those areas that are strengths.
Right.
And not so much on those areas that are not strengths. Weigh in on that.
That's great. I'm glad you brought it up, because I believe in spiritual gifts. I think we're all gifted, and I love what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians, that all the gifts work together, that none of them are more important, because we can do that too. And the body only works best when we're all using our gifts, and it just is, we're stronger together. And yet, what is foundational to any spiritual gift is servanthood, an attitude of servanthood, and a willingness to do whatever has to get done. And so, chairs need to be set up for the church service because we're planting a church. Well, I don't have that gift. Well, no, that's really not what we're saying here, right? Then who's going to do it?
Nobody has the spiritual gift of setting up chairs.
Yeah, right, exactly. And so, I would say, again, I might be wrong in this. I'm not going to build my case on this or write a book on this, but I think servant attitude supersedes spiritual gifts in the sense of it's foundational to everything else. And that we're going to be servants of the Lord Jesus. That's what we're called to do. And that's the way Paul described himself, right? In the book of Romans, chapter 1, verse 1. I'm a servant of Jesus. I'm a bond servant. I've been marked by him. And Oh, am I really, can I preach and teach? Yeah, that too. But we start there.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yeah.
So important to remember. Steve, on our notes here, we've got down Philippians 2, 1
Mm.
to 11, the spiritual emotions of
Mhm.
Jesus. I know that verse has been really
Mhm.
powerful in your ministry.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you've preached on it many
I
times.
just, yeah, it is. And I just keep going back to it. And I would encourage guys, we're not going to read the whole thing here, but if you're looking for a good study for yourself or for your small group, go to Philippians chapter 2, 1 through 11 and look at it, because what you're going to see there is in verses 1 through 4, Paul gives us the sort of the admonition to put others ahead of yourself. He says, this is what humility is. And then in verses 5 through 11, he gives us an example. He gives us the example of Jesus. Jesus is the one who started no higher and ended up no lower. And it's really the 7 spiritual demotions of Jesus. And basically what Jesus says is, I'll meet you at the bottom. I'll meet you at the bottom. And that's what servanthood is. It's saying, you know what, I'll meet you at the bottom.
Yeah.
And that's so counterculture as we started out,
Wow.
right?
And sacrificial.
Yeah, because we want to be at the top.
Right.
And Jesus says no.
So good. So we've talked about investing in the lives of
Mhm.
others and servant leadership.
Mhm.
Next on our list is
Mm.
effective leaders know where they are going.
Mhm.
They know where they are going.
Yeah. Yeah, when you look throughout scriptures, you it's just full of examples of Caleb. Give me that mountain, right? He's in his 80s.
He wants
He's
to
not in
take it.
Florida sipping margaritas.
He wants
He
to
is-
take the high ground.
He wants to take the high ground still. He has a sense of mission. And Moses says, I'm going to deliver the people. I'm going to get them to the promised land. And Nehemiah, I'm going to rebuild the walls. Paul was an apostle to the Gentiles. And then Jesus, it starts there. Jesus knew who he was, he knew where he come from, and he knew where he was going. John chapter 13, verse 3. And I think so often as a leader, we can have mission drift in our life, and that every one of us has been made by God for God to be on mission for God. And it tells us in Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, that we are his masterpiece.
Yeah.
We're his masterpiece, that we were made for good works, to do a good work, not good works for salvation, but based on salvation, a good work. We all have a work to do. And
Just to clarify, we're
Mhm.
not talking here so much about vision for God's purposes, God's plan for the ministry.
no,
I think we're talking more about on a personal level.
yes, right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Good clarification. Just that you as a leader, you sort of know where you're going and what you're about.
Right? Mm.
And what's God calling you to be as a person, and then to do. And so yeah, when you have that sort of that personal mission statement, it really gives you a sense of direction, and it helps you to focus on what's important and what's not important. And I think it prepares you for God's final evaluation of your life. He's going to say, okay, what did you do with my son? And then what did you do with all that I gave you? All the talents and all the gifts and all the resources. Did you use them or did you waste them? And so we want to put ourselves in a position where we're glorifying God through what he has for us. And
Steve, we talked about this a little bit last week on the
Mhm.
caveat on this list, but I might be a listener dialed in here that kind of somehow found their way into a leadership
Mhm.
role, maybe got drafted into it, or
Mhm.
somebody
Maybe
volunteered,
coerced.
arm twisted. And they've never worked on a personal mission
Mhm.
statement. They've never really understood why it was
Yep.
important. They haven't done this before.
Mhm.
What encouragement would you give them?
Yeah, and I'd say, just a couple really quick applications or things to think about. Understand it's not you're not determining, you're not choosing a purpose, you're discovering the purpose. That it's not like, I want to be a great preacher, or I want to be a great leader, or whatever. It's a discovery process. It's not going to happen overnight. Most of us are not going to have a burning bush experience where God says, go there, right? It's just going to be over time. And I think that's important. I think it's going to come from time in the scripture, that there are a number of passages in the scripture and that speak to God's purpose for our life as a follower of his. And so it's just looking at the scriptures, and as you're reading through them and praying through them, you're saying, God, what would you have for me? What do you want me to be about with my life? And then it's sitting down and just saying, what am I good at? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are the passions? What do I enjoy doing? What gives me life? What gives me a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction? Here's what you need to know, is that what God's purpose for your life is going to be consistent with the way he made you. He's not going to have you doing something that's not consistent with who he made you, with what your passions are and your experiences and your giftedness and all those things. Is that your purpose in life will be consistent with the way he made you. It's almost like I use the analogy of an architect, is that when an architect's going to build a building, they go to the people that they're going to use the building and say, how are you going to use this? Is it going to be a hospital? Is it going to be a showroom for a car? Are you going to build widgets or a school, whatever? Well, then they design the building accordingly to its purpose. Well, God has designed each one of us perfectly to be consistent with the purpose he has for us. So just start asking yourself some of those questions, and then ask others. Get the input of other people. What do you see me doing well? What could you see me doing in the future? What don't I do well?
Yeah, this is a good one where we talked last week about Paul, Barnabas, and Timothy.
Exactly.
You can bounce these ideas off of them.
Yeah, right? Totally. Yeah. And then you need just to take some low-level probes. Just start trying some stuff. And it's sort of like, you just okay, maybe it's going to serve with Habitat. And you try that. Well, that wasn't a really good fit. Maybe you want to work with some high school students. Try that. You're not making a lifetime commitment to these things, right? You're just taking some low-level probes. You're just trying some stuff. And I remember when I started teaching, I didn't know if I was any good. So they sent me over to the nursing home, and I'd go there on Sunday afternoons. And tough audience, right? I mean, really tough.
They fall asleep.
They did. And they were drooling and falling asleep and saying things and whatever. But, I learned. I cut my teeth on that. And at least I had teeth. But you just take some low-level probes and you just try some things as well. So, yeah, it's just that discovery process of saying, there are lots of things I could do, but what must I do? Yeah.
That's so
good.
That's so good.
Yeah.
Hey, Steve, we are almost there on our
Okay.
list of
I'm sorry.
7 qualities of an
Okay.
effective leader. We're on number 7.
All right.
And we're going to be talking here about perseverance. And the quality of an effective leader being perseverance.
Yeah.
You mentioned several people in Scripture who demonstrated extraordinary perseverance. Daniel, Nehemiah, Peter, Paul. On our notes here, we've written down also Billy Graham and Mother Teresa. These are examples for us of perseverance. But have you seen others maybe less popular?
Yeah. I mean, probably even Stuart Briscoe, our senior pastor, died a couple of years ago. He's probably more famous in a sense. But
I remember that story of you running into Stuart in India.
Yeah, right. And I'm going there in a couple of weeks. And so I'm going to India to do men's conferences and speak, and sure enough, I was working with Operation Mobilization. They picked me up at the airport. They said, okay, they took me to my apartment on the compound there with OM, and they said, you're on the 2nd floor. And so I walked up the stairs with my bag, and I opened the door, and there's Stuart sitting right in the living room, or in the same apartment. And neither one of us. He was there to do pastors' conferences. I was there to do men's ministries. So for the whole week, we just hung out. But one of the things we did is we talked about this very topic. How do you build a life that lasts? because so many ministry leaders don't make it to the end. And the Bible is full of them, and we see them all over in the world today. And I
When
look
you
to,
ran into Stuart in India, he
Yeah.
must have been deep into his 70s.
yeah, he was definitely in his 70s,
Wow,
definitely in his 70s.
that's perseverance.
Yeah, it is perseverance, right? But he built into the life certain habits and disciplines that allowed him to finish strong. And so I would just say to the guys, and I know we're almost out of time here, but the principle is this: arrange your life in such a way to live for the long haul. What are the things you have to do now in your 20s, in your 30s, to make sure that you last? So take breaks when necessary. Just remember the Sabbath. Take your vacations.
Mm.
Get away. Second, get counsel when needed. If you're dealing with an issue, maybe it's a family of origin issue, maybe it's a wound, maybe it's something that's just happened recently in your life. Don't feel like you have to gut it out and do it yourself. Just talk to someone, talk to a friend, talk to a counselor, and then take care of yourself. You know, we've talked about this, but the hardest person to lead is yourself.
Yes.
And so physically, are you getting the rest that you need? Everyone needs a different amount of sleep. Are you eating properly? Are you exercising? Take care of yourself emotionally. Take care of yourself relationally. Take care of yourself intellectually. Are you reading? What are you reading? How are you growing? All these areas. And it really comes down to saying, okay, I'm going to arrange my life in such a way for the long haul. And like you said, Troy, talk to the guys around you.
Right.
Bring this up in your group. Let them speak into your life on this and in each other's lives.
So leaders, there are 4 more qualities of effective leaders for you to kind of consider. We've talked about leaders who invest in the lives of others. We've talked about leaders who focus on servant leadership, who know where they are going, and leaders who persevere for the long run. Steve, unfortunately, our time is up once again. We're going to have to continue this series on leadership next week.
Mm-hmm.
And leaders, we hope this episode has been helpful, as this whole series has been helpful to you and your leadership as you go and make disciples of the men in your sphere of influence. Thanks so much for dialing in. Don't forget something very important. If you find this podcast helpful, follow our show, share our show, leave a comment, give us some feedback, tell us how we're doing. Listen, for Steve Sonneman, I'm Troy Thomas. Thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for joining the No Regrets Leadership Podcast. For more information and to access past recordings, please visit www.menwithnoregrets.org/podcast.
Life Camp USA is a nonprofit organization that mentors young men who have lost a father due to military or law enforcement service. Life Camp USA provides an all-expenses-paid, week-long, world-class camp experience that inspires, equips, and navigates these fatherless young men through some of life's toughest moments. Life Camp USA's mentors serve grieving families by helping these sons establish healthy identities, values, character, and goals without the crucial aid of a father in their life. To learn more about Life Camp's mission, visit lifecampusa.org. Again, that's lifecampusa.org.